One of the things that this archive has to do, it has to induce young people
Yeah.
to want to be part of this.
You know, like
Somebody's going to have to replace Michael when he's not on our team.
Right.
You mean,
Yeah.
you mean
50 years from
75?
now.
50.
Right.
50 years.
Oh, I
from
gave
now.
him 75, just that.
There's a way to do that. When I was teaching at, up at Brown University and also at the University of South Florida, I taught black music seminars. And what you need to do is get some professors to buy in, because what I would do is have them, one of my classes interviewed Nat Adderley. So they had to do the research first, find out everything about him, come up with some questions, and then they interviewed him. He was teaching at Southern College in Plant, Florida at the time, and my students interviewed him and his students listened. And so they found out. So you can get students to do
Well,
some
the
of
challenge,
interviews and
the
some-
thing about that is that it sometimes is a kind of one-off. They do it, they do the class, they don't keep doing it after they're done with the class. What has to happen is that they have to get passionate about this to make it their mission. And the way that you do that, I think, is inclusion. So part of what I think becomes really important about this archiving process, young people have to be part of the process so they can handle some of these materials, so they understand how important it is, one, to maintain these materials in the archive, but two, to acquire more, and three, to be really sort of invested in the idea of finding people from their generation who are going to be musicians and composers and the whole 9 yards. Because my students think about jazz as old people's music, and it's not.
That's a problem, yeah. That's a
But
real
when
problem.
I had my students go out and interview people, I had a class at Rowan too. And we went together to Ortlieb's, and they heard jazz and so forth. And it was their requirement. I
Yeah.
had it in the syllabus.
Yeah.
They had to do it. And so, you know, like, okay, if I teach this course every semester or every other semester, you have a new group of people, but as part of their requirement, they have to conduct this oral history interview.
Right.
And after it, you know, I have a student that lives in Washington DC. She comes up here and listens to jazz all the time. That's the way to get them interested
I used to do that
in
at Penn. I
jazz.
used to take them to Staten
Yeah.
Avenue, Slim Cooper's.
Right.
And they'd all be sitting in front of the band with their little notes books and
I had
stuff.
a student make a film, probably one of the last films of the Natalie's Monday night jam session.
Oh, really?
He interviewed all of those musicians. I need to see if I can get a copy of that,
Yeah.
but I'm sure, I tried to get him to enter it in the contest. This is a really good film for a 21-year-old kid
Yeah.
Wow.
to have done, and he got Lucky Thompson and a bunch of other folks to go on camera to talk about the jam session. Not long after that, Natalie's closed, and now it's a boarded up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, how would you make the students a part of the process? Of the
Well,
collection or a part of the process
Well, I
of?
think that internships need to be a regular part of this. And I'll go even further, they need to be paid internships.
Of course.
But it's not just students, it's young people, you know, millennials in general. And so technology has to be infused in the project. And not to belabor the point about intersectionality, that when you said, I forgot now who said it about, think of jazz just for old folks, when they find out about the resistance, then they get interested. When I tell them about what the Checker Cafe, they had the cross dressers in the 1930s.
Right.
Then they look at jazz. It's different. It's alive. So we have to bring it. In telling the stories, we have to play it forward, bring it forward, show its relevance to today. And that's where entrepreneurs can really play an important role when they talk about how they, the jazz aesthetic, improvisation, they help them, you know, fail quick and early. that, but we definitely have to have technology part of it, otherwise the eyes will glaze over. We talking about a bunch of old men, and I'm not even interested in that.
Right.
Yeah, but I think it's all important, and, you know, one of the keys, again, you know, is exposure.
Right.
You know, it's
Exactly.
exposing young folks to it.
And you
Right.
reach them where they are,
Right.
on their cell phone.
Because, you know, it's the same thing. When I'm talking to young musicians, if I'm talking to Nazir Ebo, if I'm talking to Joseph Block, you know, I tell them, I said, listen, when I talk to a young person, it's okay, old head. When
Right.
you talk to your peer, it's a different perspective.
That's right.
You know,
That's
when
right.
you make it cool to your peers,
Make it cooler.
they hear something different than when it comes out of my mouth. So that exposure is essential. Inclusion takes it to another level.
Right.
You know, so a big part of, again, the mindset behind that Jazz Education Initiative at WRTI is to expose young folks to this music.
I think Faye's got a point though there. If you get them, right now, the young people are very into resistance
Right.
because of the world we're living in now. I
Sure.
think that is definitely an open door.
Sure.
Because the whole history of jazz is resistance.
Yeah, so you have to, one way or another, allow them to contact it. Because right now, you know, I played a piece on the air by Betty Davis.
Right.
The intern that was in the studio with me, a recent Temple graduate, it blew his mind because there's a song out right now that is sampling Betty Davis.
Right.
And he thought that was the original.
Yeah.
You know, so for him to hear that was the original took him to another place.
Right.
Yeah.
Making
Right.
those type of connections,
Yeah.
Right.
that type of exposure
Yeah, there was
is
there was a
essential.
song out by J. Cole a 3 summers ago. He's sampling from a Hubert Laws album from 1975.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Catalyst was sampled so much.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think that that's a lesson for this archive, so that people understand it as the material from which alternative stories can be told. There isn't a
Right.
single story, there
Right.
isn't a single
Right.
narrative.
Good.
Okay.
And an archive needs to be developed in a way so people understand that you take these materials and you develop your, you develop your own story. You continue to interpret this material.
Jay-Z
Right.
sampled
Going
Nina
forward.
Simone.
Right.
Yeah,
Tribe Called Quest sampled Jimmy Murray.
yeah.
You know, so
Okay.
it's there. These
Very
connections
cool.
are there. And for a lot of young folks, when they hear, you can make a jazz arrangement of Meek Mills.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you can do that. For a lot of young folks, they can't recognize or distinguish between a flugelhorn and a clarinet.
Right.
To make these type of connections, expose them to these type of things, significant.
Yeah, and exposure is really important, because when I would teach my course, I would ask my students first thing, who determines what you like in terms of music? And it really made them have to think about it, you know?
Well, you're talking about the Nina Simone Strange Fruit, right? Yeah, when I was teaching at Rowan, I was teaching a jazz course, and I used that, and that blew their minds. I said, but wait a minute, here's the woman who first did this.
Right, right.
And I showed that great clip with her and Hal Waldron,
Yeah, Mal.
Mal Waldron. And of course, as soon as they saw that,
Mesmerized.
they wanted to hear the whole story
make a
of Billie
connection.
Holiday, and all that, so.
And then we talk about Billie Holiday, Hounded, the first casualty of the war on drugs, how they hounded.
And it was in
her.
Philly,
I think it was at that hotel you
Yeah,
mentioned.
Douglas.
Well, actually, a hotel, well, she was arrested at, not at the
She was
Douglas-
the Earl Theater, wasn't
She was
she?
arrested, she was at the Earl Theater, but the hotel where she was arrested, actually still there. It's now Kenny Gamble's charter school. That
Oh,
was
okay.
the Atticus, Attucks, Crispus Attucks Hotel. That's where she was
Is that
arrested.
right?
And it's still there.
Okay,
And there's
I-
nothing
couple of minutes
there
left.
noting the history of that hotel. Kenny Gamble, he knows the history. I think that's why he bought it. For him, it's like part of his private collection, but that hotel is still there.
Since Faye just brought it up, the Kenny Gamble thing, that's another connection there, because so many jazz musicians played on those records
On
for
his
their,
records.
like,
Yeah.
day gigs,
Sure.
you know?
That's
And
right.
then also his
Right.
Yeah.